We had a science fair, which I found to be very successful. Winter Carnival, and a little mention about that is Winter Carnival, winter activities coincided with the start of the Olympics. And so what we did is we had different classrooms that would pick a country. They would kind of march out. They painted their faces. They learned a little bit about those countries. And then we had a bunch of activities outside. And despite the weather, and it was cold that day, I don't think I saw too many sad faces. I just, kids talked about it, and adults alike, about how great the winter activity and carnival went with student engagement. I put this in as a late number here, and I think it's worth noting that we have a 96% attendance rate. And I think that is, when you talk about student engagement and all the things that you're going to hear, if students aren't in class, aren't in school, then they're not going to be learning and engaging. So I think that's a number worth mentioning. Continuing with the strategic plan, information and communication, just a couple of highlights here. If you drop off or pick up your kiddos or your loved ones, you hopefully will see both Mr. Schaefer and myself. Definitely in the morning, you obviously see the full faculty and staff in the afternoon. But the idea behind that is we want to greet students when they come in, and we want to talk to families. And I can tell you how many conversations that I've had just in a quick drop-off line of like, hey, it was a good morning, or hey, can you check on this and get back to me? And it really helped to not only just meet the students, but engage with families as they're dropping off, right? Kind of headed to work or headed where they are. Just that little like, hey, I talked to somebody to kind of pass along some information, and it's really been helpful. As Christine mentioned, weekly newsletters, they go out weekly, but what I try to do is pack them in what has previously happened that week, some up and coming events, highlights and stuff like that. And I try to be consistent each week. And those newsletters are also a part of our faculty and staff. So if they want something sent out, or if there's something highlighted, they'll send that to me, and I try to get that out to folks. Another part of communication and information is weekly data dives. So I have tasked our administrative team, our counselors, our SEI teams, to take a look at disciplined attendance, tardy, our multi-tier system of support, which incorporates our SEIs. And that's really just taking a look at the data, such as attendance rates, discipline rates, those things that involve administrative involvement or SEI. So we look at that on a weekly basis. I run those reports and pretty adamant about making sure we're staying on top of that to help drive what we do in our building. Wanted to mention our SEL programs that we have, which is our counselors do a great job getting into classrooms. And as hopefully folks are there, lunch with a loved one. Again, that was my first experience, and I believe the number is somewhere around 571 folks visited the other day. Yes, for lunch with a loved one. I think that was the number, somewhere around there. So something to be proud of. Talking about culture and student wellness, some examples. Again, the attendance rate. A couple of things that we do within the building worth noting. Student assemblies, we have recognition assemblies, something called Caught You Being Good. So students, if they do something that stands out, they get a little card. It kind of goes into this tent that they build, and we pull them every 2 weeks. And it's just something to recognize. Anyone can nominate a student. And again, it's just something that they have done that's worth recognizing, and they'll come up and we'll celebrate those things. I think also worth mentioning is the students came to me to say, hey, I think it's real nice that we recognize students, but how come we don't recognize teachers? And so they themselves, the students, put cards in to recognize the great work that our teachers are doing. Leader in Me, just a buddy teacher system. Again, I mentioned that a little bit, and we're a Leader in Me school, which really engages students and gives them the ability to really advocate for things they want in the building and to be a part of those things. I mentioned our SEL programming and our school culture and engagement group. I wanted to mention that because they meet quite frequently, and recently they proposed something to administration that was about behaviors that they see on the bus, and they came up with a number of solutions that they would like to have implemented. So when you talk about agency and talk about wellness and engagement, when you have groups like that that are advocating for students and safety, that's definitely worth mentioning and applauding. Just a couple of the highlights of student achievement. Our annual school is a huge success. Student programming, performing, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, to highlight. Winter concert that we had, grades 4 to 8. Dedicated student athletes that we have on and off the field. We have a student that is on our school board, which I think is great. That's the first time that I have seen consistency with a student advocating and being on a school board, so I think that's worth mentioning. Another highlight, 5 out of 14 of our 8th grade students participate in algebra courses at the Windsor High School. It's about 35%. Our Lighthouse Leader in Me, which is student leaderships, which I've talked about. Harvest Fest, Winter Carnival, Buddy Teacher. Couple other things to highlight, taking a look at our graduating students and where they're headed and where they've been. Windsor High School, Woodstock, Thetford Academy, Lebanon, Hartford. Our current 8th grade student class, and talk about when we talk about budgets, right, and what students need to do and take on some of that responsibility, have raised over, and I think it's over now, $6,700 for the class trip. That's a lot of work, and that's great for such a small class. 7th grade and 8th grade students have been learning how to give back and serving their community. I'm sure you've seen folks out and the invitations that you received to participate in our school. Heart Awards, and this is something that we do and something that was new to me again, but it highlights students through all grades given out by teachers. We have students and families come in. When we do our assemblies, they stay after, and we just do a quick little paragraph and highlight to the great things that our students are doing. And again, they are nominated by our faculty and staff. Talked about the Caught You Being Good cards. And one other thing worth mentioning, and this is something I'm proud of, as well as there was a grant, thank you, the Byrne Foundation, to get a book vending machine, and we're going to put that in the lobby, and students can earn tokens to be able to get free books through the good deeds that they do. And it looks like a vending machine like you would candy or soda, but it'll just be dispensing books. Want to mention a couple other highlights. I don't know if folks know this, but if you walk in our building, you will see a mini kitchen fridge, food. And Mr. Schaefer said this to me today, and really worth mentioning. Have you ever been in a school where you're walking around and you're seeing students eating fresh fruit and vegetables all day long and asking for those fruit and vegetables? And I think it's really worth mentioning. A great job by Ian and our cafeteria staff. And so they do a great job of bringing those foods to our kids. There. This slide should be bigger and longer because there's no way to thank everybody in our community, but I see John here, the Hartland Rec Center, our Nordic ski program, obviously our faculty and staff, the public library, the PTO, our school board, kitchen staff, maintenance, students, community partners. All of those are reasons why we're here today, to talk about the budget, to do what we can do for our students. And so definitely worth mentioning. That picture, our 8th grade class got to film and be part of the Senate, and that was really a great trip and something that came through a grant as well. And I think that has ended my...
Good evening. Now the really fun part, the budget. I know everyone's looking forward to. So looking forward to this coming year, just to kind of go over what our goals are. Can you just go to the next one? There, no worries. So we hope to maintain a staffing plan and program of studies which supports the whole child, that aligns with our strategic plan there. And so we hope to bring forth a fiscally responsible budget that meets educational quality standards, Act 73 class size minimum requirement, and considers the impact of this budget as on our community as well. And if we move forward, let's go back in time and all the fun budgets we've already been through. And so if we go back to fiscal year 24, these are the different cuts that we've made as through the years, the last few years. So on FY24, we did cut 1 full-time educator. And then in 25, the playground addition that we were hoping to make, but then we were able to get funding through a grant to support those changes. So you will see some beautiful new playground equipment out there. 2 full-time educators, furniture upgrades, as well as locker upgrades. And then moving forward, so this year, this current year that we're sitting in, the Winter Activities Fund was cut from winter activities program. And I just have to, another shout out to John in the rec and his amazing staff that really made the winter activities program happen this year and was able to secure grants and stuff like that. So that is just like amazing. And the activities that were included that the kids are experiencing are like full. They all can go skiing if they want. They're all receiving passes to Saskatoon 6. But they can also go rock climbing, they can go swimming, they can go bowling. There's great activities just at the school itself. So there's just an amazing program. So other things that were cut though were teacher supplies, more furniture and fixtures, repairs and maintenance. We did cut one custodian, and then we cut a currently staffed PE teacher and a currently staffed K-5 teacher. And so those total cuts were just for staff were over 300,000. And so what we're looking at for changes for within this budget is we planning on cutting one full-time social emotional interventionist. When he was saying SEI, that's social emotional interventionist. And then we are hoping to add a half-time middle school math interventionist addition. So it would be a total cut of a half position within that budget. And I believe it's Larry's show.
All right, so you can find all the detail in the budget book by scanning the QR code. I'm sure there's copies at Town Hall and the post office. And so this is where you would go to get the budget book. I'm not going to go page by page. I assume it's there. And it's been available online since October, November. Next slide. The bottom line numbers, as you saw on the warning, is $11,814,613 for the FY27 Hartland General Fund. That amounts to a 5.24% total increase year over year, which would account for a 5.26% homestead estimated tax increase. And one question we get often is how much of my total tax dollar is made up of the SU, how much is high school tuition, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just a graphic example of how much your local budget. So about 42% is your K-8 local budget. About 28% of your dollar is tuition, high school tuition in Hartland's case. Special education at the SU is under 18%. Administration operations is under 10%. That would be the superintendent, the business office, curriculum, IT, et cetera. That's what we label administration operations. Early childhood program is less than 2%, and food service is a little over 1%. The primary drivers for the budget increase for 26 to 27 is contracted salary increase for teachers and support staff. Teachers are under contract through next year, and support staff are under contract through the following year. A benefits increase, which we'll talk more about, but that's basically the biggest part of that increase would be health insurance. And as mentioned earlier, a significant factor for FY27 was special education increase when it was adopted at the SU level some months back. So a lot has been said about health insurance, and I added a feature in the budget book this year, which shows that when the state law Act 11, which was passed in 2018, that health insurance, which used to be negotiated at the board by board level or at the SU by SU level, just like we negotiate contracted wages, it is now negotiated at the state level. So our boards and our superintendent have no real say over health insurance changes. And you can see what has happened since FY20 when this was passed. For example, a gold CDHP plan, which is 80% of our plans. So this is the vast majority of the plans they can choose. They can choose gold, silver, et cetera. The gold is what most people settle down on. So just to show you, a family gold CDH plan in fiscal year 19 for a family was $19,150. And we are being told by VHI, which runs health insurance for Vermont schools, that to budget for $43,920 for fiscal year 27, the budget we're working on. So that is a family plan that has more than doubled since FY19. The single plan used to be $6,900, and now we are told to budget for $15,856 for a family plan. That cost is shared 80% to 20% for the employer-employee. So we also pay the vast majority, and we can't pay more or less because we don't negotiate more or less. What would this mean for your tax rate? As you can see, this shows the percent decrease or increase in the homestead tax rate for Hartland. So there was a slight decrease in FY23 year over year, and then you could see an increase of roughly 5% in 24. It went up significant increase in 25. Then there were the cuts that the chair outlined, and then as we are approaching fiscal year 27, it is still an increase, although a slightly smaller increase than 26. What does that mean for estimated tax impact? Based on the latest from the Joint Fiscal Office and the governor's proposed buy down of $75 million, not taking into account income sensitivity, $100,000 house, for example, if this were to happen, this is why it's an estimate, for a $100,000 house would be $128 annually, or a little over, $10 monthly. If it was a $200,000 house, you would just almost double it. And then the same thing for a $300,000 house, you would triple it, and so on and so forth. And that shows, obviously, this is the table that most people are interested in. What does this mean for me and my budget? That's the estimated tax impact. Inside the budget book, I do show a breakdown of how that tax rate is calculated. There's also income sensitivity forms and a property tax calculator if anybody's interested for understanding how that works.
This will all be posted online, right? Thanks so much, Larry. I guess so. Voting day, making sure everyone remembers that important part, is the 3rd. And I will hand this back down to our moderator to manage some questions.
Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. So we're going to start first with people here in person. Is there any questions from anyone on the budget? Martin?
I have a question about the SU expense. Is each town weighted by students, or is it a set fee? Because the town of Hartland's fee seems higher than Weathersfield, and Weathersfield now has more students than Hartland. Please and thank you.
Larry, could you cover that question?
Yeah. So it's based on the LTWADM. Now this is Vermont weights their pupils, and since it was equalized pupil and then Vermont changed it to LTWADM, the state number, that's what they use to assess out the SU budget for administration operations, special ed, and early childhood. Food service is assessed out differently. So food service, they assess out not based on LTWAM, they base it basically on the students in the building. Whereas with LTWADM, there's significant special ed costs for LTWADM because it includes all students, not just the students in the building. So Weathersfield, Hartland does have more students than Weathersfield.
We get that population K through 8, please.
So we don't, it's not, K through 8, I believe they still, to this day, have slightly more students, although the gap is definitely narrowed. So to give you an example of the breakout, using LTWADM, so we always, the way we do LTWADM is we go 1 year back, because by the time we pass the SU budget, the LTWADM hasn't come out yet for FY27. So we're always 1 year in the rears. And Hartland, according to the state, has FY26 LTWAM is 641.19. Mount Scottney is 924.11, and Weathersfield is 566.36. So then we take that number, we total it up. That's 2131.66 of total LTWADM. I'm sorry, I never said what it stands for. LTWM stands for long-term weighted average daily membership. And then we break out the percentages based on that. So for example, Hartland 641.19 is 30.08% of 2131. Weathersfield is 566, so about 80 less LTWADM, and that's why they're at 26. So Hartland pays about 3.5% more than Weathersfield because they have 3.5% more kids.
So we can't get a count K through 8 students. in that
So,
building?
so we have 398 students that are Heartland students, and that's pre-K through to 12th. And then Weathersfield has 350. Pre-K 12. 220. 220. Yep, 222 in the building.
I understand,
Yeah.
but it's tuition, so that's different. That's a different cost for the high school.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the way, like, so students are weighted differently, being that, like, if a student's coming in as an English language learner, they're going to be cost more, or a special education student. And so that every student is not, the cost to educate them is not equal.
In K8, as of 24-25, Heartland was 295 and Weathersfield was 273. So if you do the math, I mean, it still sounds right with LTWAM if that's 20 plus kids. And then if you add in 9 through 12, that's an extra 20 kids, give or take. So what I said 40 earlier. I mean, again, you're getting into the weighting with LTWADM. If this SU board could decide to change that anytime. So the SU board could decide, we don't care that Hartland has more 9 through 12 students. We don't care if they increase special ed costs because they go to other high schools with increased special ed costs that get passed back on to Hartland, and therefore the SU special ed budget, and they could decide to do only what's in the building, like the way we do food service, right? If a student decides to go to Springfield High School from Weathersfield, the theory is it shouldn't cost them more of the SU food service budget because we're not feeding that kid in Springfield. Whereas with special ed, you are paying for that kid in Springfield.
Come on up. Sorry, so we don't have to hand the microphone.
Sherry Clark. Do you have a tracking system of our students when they enter high school? The number of students that enter high schools for this meet the number of students that graduate 4 years later? Do you track them in any way?
We do. We keep track of how many kids are in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th
And so
grade,
we
12th
get
grade.
reimbursed. The receiving schools send money back to Heartland if those students move on out of our district or never complete.
Any student that's enrolled in a high school you have to fill out a voucher, and we get billed by the high school. So if a student leaves that high school, then we don't pay, or we prorate for the year how long they've been there.
Yeah, say as a voucher mom, I have to fill that out every year of where they're going, because then the town will pay that. Yeah. Any other questions in-house? Come on down.
So you said, the average student cost was 19,000.
Yes.
Does that-
Yeah, let me look at the.
Does that include the state portion or is that above the $17,000 that the state pays? Because if you take 19,000 times 200 or 300 kids, you don't get $11.6 million or $11.8 million for the whole budget. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I'm trying to figure out if that 19,000 includes what's the state average that the state pays? Because the state pays a certain average.
Yes.
So if they go to a different high school or even our kids in school, they pay a certain, what above that are we paying? Are we paying between the 17 to the 19? Or are we paying 19 above the 17,000?
So you're asking what the state, making sure we understand the question is, you're
Yep.
asking what the state says they'll pay for a high school,
That, or for any kid?
for any kid. Exactly.
Yes, yep,
Exactly.
yes, please.
I have no idea, but Larry probably knows.
Thank you, Larry. Sorry to
Yeah.
bother you so much.
He's like
tonight.
the all-knowing Oz over here.
So, okay, so if I go to the high school tuition part of the budget book, there's a statewide average, okay? And I know this is going to get complicated. Hartford, let's pick Hartford. Hartford can charge whatever they want to charge. Hanover can charge whatever they want to charge, especially Hanover. With Vermont high schools like Hartford and Windsor, Woodstock, etc., if they're plus or minus 3%, they have to return it back to the local district. That almost never happens, but they are supposed to. And sometimes they do. I shouldn't say never. We do a stat book and we report back to the state, and based on the number, we give money back or we don't. You're talking about the state average, because there are some schools that are independent schools, like I'm going to get it wrong. Is it Sharon Academy? There's certain schools where you only get the state average. Other schools like Thetford Academy, again, they're not beholden to that, so they can charge whatever they want. And these charges are much higher than the $19,000 per student. So I think we're confusing the per pupil rate of spending versus high school tuition.
So we're saying it takes 19 change to educate a kid within Heartland. But Hartford High may be charging us
$24,150. Yeah.
to educate our high schooler.
Yeah.
I was under the assumption the state has a certain number because of Act 60 that each district or each school gets so much per student. And then if you spend above that, that's why the homestead rate is higher than the non-homestead rate.
Oh, so it sounds like what you're talking about is the excess spending threshold.
Yes,
That's-
please.
Yes. So that's used. The excess spending threshold for FY27 was set at $16,470. And actually, this might help if I share my screen here. Can I share my screen?
That's what I'm trying to get at. So we spend 19,000. So are we spending $3,000 per kid more?
Yes. So the excess spending threshold, and I know this is hard to see. I understand. Let me try to blow it up a little bit. So this is the property tax rate calculation that is in the budget book. I start with the total expenditures. That's the budget. I minus the offsetting revenue. That gives me the net ed spending, because we don't want the revenue included in that. The LTW-ADM, that number I spoke to earlier with Martin, is 645.85. That is higher. If you look at the Weathersfield version of the budget book online, it's higher than Weathersfield. And Mount Scotney's the highest. Then they take that number, that 11.6, they divide it into 645. That gives you what Hartland spends. If there was no excess spending threshold, Hartland would spend $17,983. But there is an excess spending threshold. The excess spending threshold is $16,470. The difference between $16,470 and $17,009 is $1,500 per student. What the state does is they penalize Hartland by taking that $1,500 and they add it to the $17,093 to give you that $19,496. And that's what you pay your taxes on.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Just so the challenge in Heartland is that original average per pupil does include high school students, and the cost to educate them is really out of our control because it's the tuition set by each school, which we have to pay, and that goes into that. So essentially, in the context of school choice, with tuition set at an unregulated rate, basically, we have to continue to take away from our K-8 education to fund high school. So I think that is really a challenge. We've tried to do that year over year over year, but some of those costs that rise are really outside of our control, and we would be required to really, really shrink our K-8 offering to keep that under the excess spending limit, and then we are penalized twice. So that's the real burden that we carry in on the school board, is trying to get to that level would require a really, really, really significant changes in our K-8 education offerings.
I mean, to add that, we did kind of do an exercise of like, what would it take to get below the spending threshold? And we no longer would meet the educational quality standards that the state puts upon us. So we'd have to get rid of, yeah. Yep. That would have to be a town decision. Yep.
This is all very likely to change in the next several years.
No one knows. Yep.
I believe you've answered my questions, but I'd like you,
Can you step up to the microphone just so the online people can hear you well?
if you could give me a more simple answer. So what is the all-in cost of educating a Hartland pupil? And how much of that is paid by the town of Hartland, and how much of it may be offset by other revenue? And when we talk about educating a pupil, are we talking about the actual number or the weighted number? So that 19,000, was that for the 272, or is that for the 600 weighted average?
That's
Weighted average.
Plus our penalty. So it's actually 17,000.
yeah. So our weighted average that's on the ballot at 19 plus, that has our penalties kind of built into it.
And I believe it's 80% property tax funded at 10, which is quite high relative to other states. We rely very heavily on property taxes to fund our education system, which is a real challenge because it puts our kids in the chokehold of rising inflationary costs.
Yeah. And so on the literal number of students we have in school, the actual cost is quite more than the 19,000. I understand the costs are not equivalent at all across students, but it's more like it's closer to 40,000. Okay. Okay.
Can I just say one thing though? I think if you're going to do the math that way, I would encourage you to subtract special education from the total budget, because I would say if your question is a kid that shows up to Hartland Elementary School in the morning and spends then 9 years going to school there in the absence of receiving special education, which consumes a very, very large amount of the budget. So I think most of the kids that are going to K-8 school, it's not a $40,000 per year exercise. So I think that is where the weighted average actually is really important, because it is designed to capture the likely expenditure on a student being educated in Hartland. It helps to offset the exceedingly high cost of special education, which goes to very, very few students ultimately.
Yep. So, yeah, no, those are gross numbers. 40,000. No. I agree.
In previous years, when we didn't have like the individual, like when we had the special ed cost by our school, we had years that it was just like up and down and up and down. You'd have a few kids move in or a few kids move out, and our budgets wavered drastically. So having them in the SU has stabilized that, even though, I mean, the cost is huge. That really hasn't changed, but the up and down momentum of it definitely has. folks that are online, if anyone would like to ask a question, please raise your little digital hand.
What is the percentage of students on special? And what does that look like? Because as a taxpayer, I'm wondering, should we fight this budget because it seems really high, or do we really have this need for a huge special ed? Is it behavioral?
So yeah, just let me answer your question just because you weren't in the microphone. I want to make sure that people heard you online. So the question was, make sure I get this right, was what is our cost for special education overall how many students are considered in our special education program within Hartland? So there's 96 students that are considered special education students within Hartland. I'll switch my little special educator hat on. So when a student qualifies for special education, it's a process they have to go through lots of evaluation to see where do they need the help. Then it's actually a legally binding document that happens where you say, this is what help this student needs. This is what the services they need. They're not going to get those services in the regular classroom. I mean, they may get it structurally in the regular classroom, but they need specialized instruction with somebody to meet those needs. And so that's where you end up having higher costs because it is specialized education within that. And so it's just something, once they have, it's called an individualized education plan, an IEP. That's a legally binding document that then the school is like, oh, we have to follow this. This is what it says this child needs to succeed in education. We are obliged to follow that. So you can't really just decide, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. We can't anymore or something like that. You just have to kind of follow the rules of that. But it is an extensive process. It's not like, somebody walks in and says, oh, I think this kid needs special education. It's a very extensive process to become into the special education process.
What is the total special ed budget?
What is the total special ed budget? I was going to say, do we have that on a post-it? Or does Larry? Our all-knowing Oz, Larry? I feel like because his head's floating. Heartland's portion of special ed?
Yes. Well, do you want Heartland's portion of special ed, or do you want, I can give it anyway. Let's go down to that portion. So Heartland's portion of the special ed budget. So the SU special ed assessment is 2.99. So Heartland's portion is 1.83 of the I'm going to do some math of the total 2, 4, 3, 5, 6. So that's almost $8 million is special ed at the SU, and Heartland's portion
Say
is
that number again.
It's almost $8 million, and 1.8 of which, sorry, 2 million is
That's
at
you.
Heartland.
What's Heartland's share of that 8 million?
2,080,000. Weathersfield share is 1.837, so about 170,000 less. And Mount Scottney's almost 3 million, 2,000 away from 3 million. So Mount Scottney pays an extra $1 million.
It is, I believe it says right here, 17.63%.
What?
Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So in the budget book, I know it's hard to see without color, but online it's all color. And you could see the difference. This is the SU assessments, and the general fund is basically administration, operations, and special ed. So let's set ECP, which is early childhood program, and food service aside for a minute. And this shows what from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 27, how much of the SU budget has gone up between special ed and non-special ed spending. You know, administration has averaged in a 3% increase every year, while special ed is about a 7% increase. But as you can see in 27, it is a much more significant increase. For example, the SU general fund budget is up 16%, but 14.6% of that 16% is special education. Less than 2% is administration and operations.
Why has it gone up so much?
So I can't. So if you look on the special, if you go by the detail, if you go to general fund under by account, you will see that we are spending significantly more in out of district placement. So there are some students that have such significant needs way beyond the IEP process that was laid out earlier that they are placed elsewhere, but they still live in one of our member towns. And those costs can be very high. Now, what's important to understand about FY27 is those costs were there in 25 and 26 in the actuals. But you didn't see an increase in your assessment in the actuals. We were able to keep it tight to the budget because of increased revenue from the state. So for any student that is over $67,000, the state, let's say a student, for example, in special ed costs is over $200,000. Anything over that $67,000, the state reimburses the SU at 90% over that number. So there's a revenue. That's why we haven't increased the assessment during the budget year, during the actual fiscal year under the actuals, even though costs have significantly gone up. That 14.6% accounts for those students that are already here and have been here for the last couple of fiscal years. We just haven't had the opportunity to budget for them, which we are doing now. So on the revenue side, there will be an offset. And that's where we are. So I can't get into specific students, but there are some students that cost significantly more than $200,000. And we still have to pay for that, even though the state later on in the year, which will be next fiscal year, would reimburse us for those costs at the tune of 90%, unless they move out, but then we don't have those costs.
Got it. Thank you. I'm just wondering if the general trend for the number of children that need special education is going up, and if so, why? And is anybody looking at addressing that side of it?
There are more needs. More students are qualifying for special education across the state. It's a great question. I think there's a study being done right now no, we're not the only. Vermont has high, yes. So I'm certainly happy to relay that question to the special ed director and have her reach out to help answer it. But I mean, we hired a new special ed director this year. She's really putting some procedures in place to try to, you have to meet certain requirements to be, what's the word I'm looking for? To not just qualify, but I mean, we have students, no, not that one, to be assigned a one-on-one. So some students have one-on-one support all day long in the classroom and out of the classroom. And so she's put parameters in place for qualification for those services or that level of service that we're implementing now. And the tricky part is to bring down special education costs, you have to change IEPs or you have to have students move out, and you're always having transitions of move-ins and move-outs. But and we want students to graduate off of IEPs but as they're written, we have to provide that level of service, and that means people. I mean, let's be real; those are positions in our schools, and to lessen that number, we really have to look carefully at the services of each child and meet those needs, but also think about things in a different way. Could this service be met in a small group instead of one-on-one? So those are the conversations we're having across the state, but I don't have a specific answer. I think kids are coming to school with more needs. That's just a fact, from pre-K on, and we're trying to meet those needs, and the schools are not just educating, we are providing mental health resources, we are providing food security for many families. We're providing a lot more than schools used to be required or asked to provide, and we are happily doing that, but it costs money. And so some of the costs you're seeing in the budget reflect those needs of the students that we're serving.
And to piggyback on what Christine is saying, the next chart underneath the chart I just shared shows that it's not, I have Vermont on the left. So the blue chart on the left is only Vermont. And so it's not just our SU. And you can see there was a 456% increase in mental and behavioral health positions in Vermont school districts. This isn't nationwide. This isn't SU. This is Vermont. 456% increase in these positions over 3 years. And then I broke that down to the right to see what would that look like by function with psychological services. We break all our spending out by function and object and everything. So, for the auditors and for you, for transparency. And psychological services spending, the orange is the actual that we've spent for psychological services. The green is the budgeting. And this is only 22 through 25. I wanted to show it side by side with Vermont. So it would be obvious that what we're seeing at our SU is not atypical for Vermont. And you could see now, why didn't the assessment go up by that amount by the actuals? Because there is a revenue offset. If the money is tied to students' IEP costs, then over $67,000 up to 90%, we're still on the hook for 10% for every dollar over that 67,000. And we're on the hook for the full first 67,000. But that's why it doesn't look the same for the assessment, I guess, is my point. And by the way, that's just one function. That's just psychological services. That's not occupational therapy or speech, etc.
And thank you. If I could just ask one more, probably really dumb question. So does Medicaid or something to do with the human health services not cover any of those costs?
We do get some Medicaid reimbursement when we bill, yes, but it is.
Oh, I can't hear her.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do bill Medicaid for reimbursement, and we see those numbers come in, and it is something, but it is not nearly the cost that are associated. Yes.
Thanks.
I'm good with my answers to the questions if you put them in your minutes. But Larry, one question for you was, with that state reimbursement, how budgetable is that? Could that go away? And all of a sudden we have a contingent liability coming back on the town. And then when we're talking about special needs children, before what I was getting at is how many are cognitive, how many emotional behavioral, how many physical? It sounded just from what you touched on there that we're seeing much, much more of emotional behavioral as opposed to cognitive and perhaps physical.
And I will say, not every kid checks a box. Lots of times it's a mixture of all of them.
Yes,
on there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that changed it. Is the IEP process in the qualification process for meeting the needs of a special needs child, are they constant across the state? Or are
Yes.
they're not, so a different?
Yeah, we don't make up the rules of how a student qualifies for special ed. Yep.
Thank you.
The sort of academic metrics like reading and math by general population relative to IEP, just sort of obviously misses a whole lot of nuance, but captures that in general, kids on IEPs are struggling more in the basic cognitive functioning of reading and math relative to the general population of students. And that might be helpful to show. From our special ed director.
So this is the whole SU. It's not broken down by district, but intellectual disability 14, deaf and blindness less than 10, multiple disabilities less than 10, developmental delay 52, traumatic brain injury less than 10, autism spectrum disorder 33, hearing loss less than 10, speech or language impairment 21, visual impairment less than 10, emotional disturbance 16. I think that was what you were getting at. Yep. Orthopedic impairment less than 10, other health impairment 74, and specific learning disability 83. That's the breakdown.
So, and within, like, those are all the categories that the state basically allows us to check off, essentially, as like where could they be struggling within the school system. And other health impairment can be something as simple as like they broke their leg and they can't get around and they can't go gym class. I mean, there's like simple things, or it could be attention deficit disorder can also be falling underneath that. So that's why 73 seems really strange as like other health impairment, but that's usually why that falls under there. Yeah. Come on down.
Last question, I promise, and thank you for your patience. So last year, the state bought the budget down by 182 million. This year, they're guesstimating 75 million. You're assuming you're going to get the 75 million, so that's why you showed us the slide. I'm hoping you have in your process, it's all going to come back, how you're going to address that situation, because that is going to be one huge situation. The special ed is only about a third of your budget, and we'll give you 40%. So there are more ways to make this budget better for the taxpayers. And don't get me wrong, both my kids went through the school. It's a great school system, but there comes a time when we have to start weighing what can be done and what can't be done, because people in this town are getting to the point where they can't afford it. You said $128 per 100,000. If the state decides to do nothing, it's like $228 per $100,000, which now makes a $300,000 house almost $100 a month. So I'm hoping that you folks have a plan of how to go forward with this. Act 73, from what I've read in the news, hasn't caught on fire, and a lot of towns have fought it. So I really don't see that going anywhere. And school choice is great, don't get me wrong, but we need to reel it in and maybe pick 3 schools for our kids in this town and stay at those 3 schools. And maybe they know they get them coming in, maybe they can help us with the price. So just food for thought. I hope the board is really have on top of it, because taxpayers at this point are at the, and it's not your fault. I get that, but you guys have families, lots of kids, expenses. At some point, we got to make that hard choice, because people at their houses are making these exact same choices. Yes, it's only $128. That's $10 a month. What do I have to cut to make sure I make my taxes? So I'm hoping that you folks put it on top, and I thank you for your patience tonight.
Thank you. I was just going to say, is there anyone else online though for questions or comments? We're good. Then I'll let.
I really appreciate your comment, and I want to just sort of share that we really do hold that very sincerely. You know, I say to people, like, I didn't move back here for school choice. Like, I moved back here to be in Hartland. And if people start leaving Hartland, that undermines my whole value of me having my kids grow up in this town, right? So I totally hear you. I think my hope is that the high school tuition dynamics will really change for us. I don't know how yet, but I do see the way that year after year that has really driven us into this excess cost. There's things that just are so far out of our control. The health insurance spending. My other hat is, as many of you know, I'm a physician. I feel very guilty all the time when I see what my day job is doing to, the costs of healthcare in America, right? It's all of that. It's all interconnected. But I think, the only other thing I would say is, ideally we continue to advocate with our state legislatures to say, put in place things to protect towns like ours from these costs that are outside of our control. And I would, very strongly advocate for finding ways other than property tax to fund education entirely, right? Nobody can use a shingle on their house to buy groceries, but there are creative ways to raise revenue or turning to more income tax if it, so I just want to thank you for being here and reassure you that we do hold this very challenging situation with a lot of sincerity and.
I'd like to make a comment, and it's not specific to the school budget or what's been discussed tonight, but the larger school funding crisis in the state of Vermont. Most of the discussions like tonight are about taxes. I can't afford this. I can't afford that. Very little discussion is had related to the revenue side of things. Okay, there's obviously not enough money coming in. Now, that's not a school board issue. That's more a town government issue. It's more a state government issue, and it's really speaks to a need for throughout the state of Vermont, a change in the paradigm, a change in the whole attitude towards growth. If there were an increase in the tax base here in Hartland and the pain was spread more widely, that would be having a whole different discussion tonight. So how do you do that in a rural town while obviously increasing revenue from a commercial or industrial tax base? Ain't going to happen because there's no infrastructure. There's no town water. There's no town sewage. So it's highly unlikely that there will be a factory or two that are built here in Hartland to generate commercial tax revenue. So it's back to homestead revenue. It's back to property tax. And like everybody else, you don't want things to change. The bucolic nature of Vermont, the bucolic nature of Hartland. Oh, I want it to stay like this forever. Well, then you're going to watch your taxes go up year after year because to a large degree throughout the state, and it's been like Martin, I'm a news hound too. Something's got to change, and people don't pay enough attention to the revenue side of things. The state of Vermont needs more growth across the board, industrial tax revenue, commercial tax revenue. And if there were, just throw out some numbers here, if there were 50 more homes here in Hartland that were paying whatever amount in annual taxes, well, that's going to make a little dent. That's going to ease the pain. So this is, I guess, for the taxpayer and the citizens to think about in Hartland throughout the state. Well, it's time for a change, and it's a change in attitude. And maybe we should welcome more people into the small towns here in Vermont that would be willing to pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So just a thought. You got to have more come in than you got going out. I'm not a graduate of the Tuck School of Business, but I understand that principle. Thank you.
I've been thinking about this for a while, but I call it share the burden. Do we pay for health insurance just for those that we employ, and then their families get it elsewhere? I mean, to me, anybody that gets health benefits from taxpayers, first priority is the employee. Their families or the second income that comes into this into that household should have it from their employer, But if they're choosing all of the health benefits from the taxpayer's aspect, then maybe those percentages of what we're paying should change a little bit.
Yeah,
When
as,
you've got two incomes in the same household, but there's access to benefits elsewhere.
yeah, employees can choose their plan. Some we don't, some of our employees don't get their health care with us.
Right.
They get it elsewhere. You can choose a family plan. You're paying 20% of that plan, the employee. But
It's not
again,
a policy that we're following.
it's negotiated at the state and we follow what the state says.
So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not just locally. It should be all the way up through federally
Yeah.
regarding
Yeah.
our percentages that taxpayers are paying.
Yeah, thank you. Great comment. We do have an online question. Moira, I believe.
Yep, that's me. Moira Ripley, I'm a town resident, and first I so appreciate all that all of you do. The board members are volunteers and the rest of you all together. I really appreciate all the work you do all year long. My question is not about the budget. I'm interested in the reading and math scores, the performance, and I'm sure you also wish that the percentage of students who met basic proficiency level didn't just hover around 50%. And I'm wondering which students go into that 50%, given that Hartland has a significant number of special ed students who qualify for special ed status, which is fine. Do those students, do they complete the same assessments, and do their numbers go into the
Yes.
numbers that you report?
Yes.
They do. Okay,
They
well,
do.
that makes me feel a little less.
They are included, yes, and
About-
we definitely look at our data regularly and talk about strategies to improve the data because our goal is everybody, 100% of our kids are proficient in English and math. So we're trending in the right direction in most cases, which is good news. We have strong teachers and strong interventionists and a strong administrative team who has really become very data oriented and instituted data practices. So our teachers are looking at the data regularly and talking about first instruction, right? That's most important. So yeah, great question. And yes, our special ed students are included in that data.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Anyone else online? I'm going to hand this down. Official moderator to close that.
He's already packing up.
I'm exhausted from all the work. I just want to thank everyone for coming. And remember, town meeting, I believe it's March 3rd. And the polls are open, Martin, what? 7 o'clock till 7 o'clock. So please come out and vote. Thank you so much. Thank you, school board members. Thank you, administration. Everybody have a safe evening. Drive home carefully. Good night.